Today on The Global African, we'll discuss the political situation in Egypt, the tragic lynching of a Haitian man in the Dominican Republic, all that and more today on The Global African. I'm your host, Bill Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. On February 11, 2015, the police in the Dominican Republic city of Santiago discovered a very disturbing sight. The lynched body of a Haitian immigrant found hanging from a tree, hands and legs bound. The body was that of Henry Claude Jean, an immigrant from Haiti. Now, though Dominican officials attributed the killing to a dispute among Haitians over a winning lottery ticket, Haitian observers and many around the world have called what happened a lynching. Jean's killing comes at a tense moment in relations between two countries sharing the same island, the Dominican Republic in the east and Haiti, the poor neighbor to the west. The most critical recent development was a 2013 ruling by the highest Dominican court revoking the citizenship of all Haitian immigrants arriving in the Dominican Republic since 1929, as well as that of their descendants. This ruling may leave as many as 250,000 Dominicans of Haitian descent effectively stateless. What do we make of this court decision, and what do we make of the tension that's growing on the island of Hispaniola? How do we make sense of what appears to be growing racism within the Dominican Republic? Or is this simply a tactic used by a desperate political party in order to retain power? How much is the Dominican aversion to black citizenship a historical concern, and how much can be attributed to a desire to limit the competition of cheaper Haitian labor? Can and should the United States use its tremendous economic power in the Caribbean to pressure the Dominican Republic into a more equitable stance towards its Haitian immigrants? We're having our panel discussion with Linda Lubert, a professor, associate professor in economics at Morgan State University as a researcher. Also joining us is our friend James Early, an African, Caribbean, and Latin American history scholar and member of the board of the Institute for Policy Studies. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there's a lot for us to cover. And I want to start with something that the situation in the Dominican Republic, which I don't think has been getting the kind of attention in the US media that it should. I mean, the lynching of this Haitian immigrant in the city of Santiago. And then last year, this, what feels to be almost a Hitlerian decision by the High Court to eliminate essentially the lives of 250,000 people, basically saying that they no longer qualify for citizenship. And so I guess part of the question is, why is this happening, and what needs to be done? Because I feel like, I feel this sense of urgency that something needs to be done to stop whatever this, I don't know whether it's exaggerating the situation too much, but I feel like this could at some point take on almost genocidal proportions if it's not somehow brought in for a landing.
I think there is a historical and a contemporary correlation of racism and class issues. Historically, it was black Haitians who liberated the entire archipelago of Saint-Domingue,
Right.
With Haiti being on one side and Dominican Republic being on the other. Dominicans who look like the three of us often describe themselves as indios, not as black. And so it's an alienation from their roots in terms of their biological roots. It's a rejection of blackness. And we see that throughout Latin America in less stark terminology. People will call themselves mulattoes, some derivation.
Well, it seems that it's been developing over the last few years. And what struck me, and maybe this is just very naive, is that when that high court decision was handed down, I actually expected a greater response by countries, other countries, I expected, frankly, almost an embargo on the Dominican Republic, because I mean, this could lead to some sort of ethnic cleansing. You know, at a minimum, this population of Haitian descendants are put in a twilight zone.
But Bill, how well was that information relayed to the public, or outside of just the, you know, in the Dominican Republic and Haiti? I mean, like, not until I read about it did I know about it. So, I don't think that, you know, I'm kind of on the margin with that. I think a lot of us, you know, we are now just finding out, and maybe it took the lynching to bring it about. And you already said that it isn't even reached the mainstream media attention that it deserves in this day and age. So I think it's been somewhat isolated or insulated, I should say, within the country, and that lynching is now bringing focus and attention to it, which it deserves.
Well, there is a struggle in Latin America, though.
That's what I was going to ask you about.
Right. And so within the Caribbean community countries, CARICOM, there has been a big issue of it that has embargoed the Dominican Republic from pursuing a full membership within the CARICOM countries of the, I think, other 15 members or so. That discussion is going on right now. We're going on a few days within the Bahamas, where the issue will be raised again. So they've taken a position. However, the ALBA countries, Venezuela, Cuba, Ecuador, the left progressives, they've been somewhat quiet about this. At this community of Latin American and Caribbean nations about a year ago, which was held in Havana, Prime Minister Gonzalez pushed this issue to the dismay of many of the Caribbean leaders, because this was an opportunity to foreground Cuba's re-entrance formally into Latin America. But he was pushing the issue about race in the Dominican Republic. The other complication here is that a number of these countries reject the Inter-American Court, which is a part of the Organization of American States. And so they have complications about human rights issues there. But that does not relieve them of the democratic responsibility of addressing the issue of race. You've got Brazil with over 50% of the population being Afro-descendants. That's 90 million African descendants. Cuba largely looks like the three of us sitting around this table. So they can't have it both ways. They've got to stand forth, because these are the most marginalized people in terms of the poverty indices, including indigenous populations in Latin America. But in the Caribbean, we're talking about black folk. The darker you are, the poorer you are. Well, I think for African Americans, we've got to claim the history of Haiti, the only republic from a slave rebellion. Enslaved Africans developed the second independent country here in the Americas from this. The only country to defeat three Western powers, the British, the French, and the Spanish. The Black Caucus has got to step forward. Members of the Black Caucus who are members of the Foreign Relations Committee in the United States have got to step forward. The RFK Human Rights Foundation in Washington is addressing the issue. Danny Glover and I visited with them a while back to talk about the issue, and we're beginning to collaborate with them in trying to unfold a strategy around this. But black folk have got to take themselves more seriously in the foreign policy arena, not just on domestic issues. And we've got to take ourselves more seriously in the context of the diaspora, particularly given the UN's declaration of a decade of Afro-descendants starting this past January. So there are opportunities and frameworks for us to step forward.
We're going to take a quick break. We're joined by Zenaida Mendez, a native of the Dominican Republic. Zenaida served for several years as Director of Racial Diversity Programs at the National Organization for Women and their national office in Washington, D.C. Ms. Mendez has many years of experience working on issues affecting people of color, women, some of which include equal pay for equal work, public affordable child care services, housing, economic, racial, and environmental justice. Zenaida, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you and your audience.
Great. So we want to look at this developing crisis in the Dominican Republic. and your analysis of precisely what is going on. The report of February 11th of this, what appeared to be a lynching of a Haitian immigrant in the city of Santiago. Can you talk some about this? What's the background to the situation?
Well, it's not a lot of the background of the situation. We would have to go to history from the 1844 to this day, and then during the 30 years of Trujillo dictatorship, who fomented a fraction, a hatred against Haitian. So to this day, that is still unfortunately happening in the Dominican Republic. This tragedy that happened is 2 weeks ago of these young men that were hanged. It is alarming. It's alarming for all of us. It's alarming for all human beings, because this is not about who is right, who's wrong. This is about standing up for what's right. And the fact that the Dominican authority cannot tell what happened, and they want to blame this as a robbery. Who is going to rob you and then take the time to kill you and hang you? It makes no sense. So we are demanding that the authority in Dominican Republic give a thorough report of their investigation in this particular case.
Now, this murder came on top of, or followed by a year, a decision by the High Court in the Dominican Republic to essentially eliminate the citizenship of what, 250,000 people?
Exactly. Even though this is addresses all foreigners in Dominican Republic, we know that this is affect about 92% of Haitian descent. They say, no, this is affect everyone who's a foreigner in the Dominican Republic. We know that this is definitely targeting the Haitian population. The Haitian population that without the Haitian, Dominican Republic cannot function this day. It's like us in the United States. Without the Latinos and the African and all of us that are immigrants, United States cannot function. In my opinion, in the latest year, in the last 10 years, what's going on is that the government of Dominican Republic, some of the last government, they want to focus on the Haitian population so that the Dominicans do not focus on what they are doing. They are selling the Dominican Republic piece by piece. There's a lot of corruption. In the meantime, everyone is focusing on the Haitian population, that we have an invasion, and it is unfortunate. It's very unfortunate was the situation there. I also have to say that the government in Haiti should have been more responsible and negotiated with the government in Dominican Republic and come to some kind of agreement, do some kind of mediation, a remediation of the situation. And this is, so this is what I feel that, there are many international organizations that are looking at the situation. And the only reason that we are talking about this today is because Amnesty International and others organizations have issued report about the mistreatment of Haitian in the Dominican Republic.
Let me ask you one final question, although it's a big question. The majority of the population of the Dominican Republic is mixed. I mean, there's, clearly very definite African blood flowing through the veins of most of the population of the Dominican Republic. What is it that people are thinking that would lead them to feel that despite the fact that they have African blood flowing through their veins, that there's something somehow demonic about Haitians?
Well, many, like I mentioned, through history, Dominican, to this day, my Dominican passport does not say that I'm Black. And as you can see, I'm very Black. It called me dark Indian or light Indian. To this day, 2015,
wow,
we are not recognized as Black people. And that's something that is internalized oppression. that we have to deal with. Like I said, there's a lot of people doing great work in Dominican Republic. There are many of us that we are very clear that we are Africans and African descendant. But at the same time, there is those who still, have to come to that conclusion as well.
Thank you very, very much for spending this time with us and illuminating this issue.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for this segment of The Global African. I'm your host, Bill Fletcher, and we'll be back in a moment. From 1981 to 2011, the regime of Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak was able to retain power through a use of corruption, repression, as well as holding out the promise of economic development. Corruption, including direct government handouts to eligible voters and their families, has long been critical to maintaining power in a nation where many still survive on only $2 a day. Nevertheless, towards the end of the Mubarak regime, not even the free blankets and affordable health care delivered by the government was enough to overcome widespread discontent with a disturbingly unresponsive leader. The 2011 revolution that successfully ousted Mubarak was to a great extent inspired by a desire at the level of the population to rid itself of corrupt government. Yet at this point, in 2015, the results of that revolution remain questionable. Current President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi formally secured power through a 2014 election in which he won a Mubarak-esque 97% of the vote. Since then, vote-buying corruption seems to have noticeably reemerged. A number of the new practitioners include powerful businessmen and former Mubarak officials who now are seeking a seat in parliament. These new developments raise some very disturbing questions. Have the results of the 2011 revolution essentially dissipated? Is el-Sisi intent on restoring the essence of the Mubarak period, regardless of the form? What forces, if any, can limit the prevalence of corruption in a nation where so many depend on the gifts of official corruption just to get by? And if the government is unable to address widespread corruption, how can it hope to present a successful image and counter the so far successful propaganda of Islamic extremist groups such as ISIL? The situation in Egypt and Libya seems very, very unsettling. In Egypt, we go from the promise of a great revolution in 2011 to what appears to be a complete counter-revolutionary restoration of the Mubarak people without Mubarak, but very well entrenched. And then right next door, the complete collapse of the Libyan state, a virtual civil war, and now the apparent emergence of ISIL. Well, what do we make of that?
Well, I mean, first of all, Egypt is a complicated situation. I guess I have a different vantage point about the potential of 2011 and the so-called Arab Spring. There were spontaneous democratic eruptions without a clear pathway, and therein the right-wing moderates, if you might put them, who were behind Mubarak, stepped up, overturned the democratic election, which brought secular Islamists in. And the United States, while talking on part of its mouth about democracy and human rights, is caught between a rock and a hard place with its foreign policy of supporting the present government of Asi, I guess is his name. The other complication is that, Egypt, these Christians in Libya are of the poorest class group in the nation. There's estimated, I think, in 2014 to be about 2 million Egyptians who cannot survive in Egypt, so they're going to Libya. And the last complication here is, of course, Libya was one of the more economically developed and stable entities on the whole continent of Africa after South Africa, which the Clintons and the Obamaites and the Republicans all went in and overthrew and massacred in a very brutal way Muammar Gaddafi. And now the U.S. is following one of its two standard courses. If it cannot control in North Africa and the Middle East, then chaos is what it uses to destabilize and control. So it's a very complicated situation that the public needs to sift through and not get trapped on a sort of simple A or B answer about it.
Right, because you see a lot of Egyptians coming, who migrate, who would go to, but those are the more educated folks who would go to maybe Saudi Arabia and that sort of place. And yet I believe it's more the southern Egyptian with less education, poor, who are the ones who are then like, I want a job. I want a job. All right, over here, even though it might be unstable, at least I can get a job and I can have money so that I can support my family.
You've got to have a democratic governance with a stable economic situation where you don't have these unnatural forced migrations either because of economics war or economics and war. So with regard to Egypt, the more educated population that can't find jobs in Egypt, as you point out, are going to Saudi Arabia for technical work and the like. And the poor folk, but they're escaping for the same economic reasons.
Right.
And so ultimately, it is how do we work with progressive forces within these nations over the long run, even as we address the immediate issues, both for democracy and for economic stabilization, and stop these unnatural migrations where people are dying in the Mediterranean, coming out of North Africa, including Egypt, trying to get to Europe, drowning to death. And the U.S. is still supporting, U.S. government is still supporting through, I guess, the second largest aid in the region after
Israel.
After Israel.
As part of the deal between Sadat and Begin.
Right.
To go back to an earlier point that you were raising, James, the Arab Spring represented democratic uprisings. And with the possible exception of Tunisia, they weren't revolutions.
Right.
They were, in the case of Egypt, successful in driving out Mubarak, but not in transforming the real nature of the state. And we're living with that. When we look at Libya, while I agree that it was stable, and I also agree that the killing of Gaddafi was heinous, Gaddafi himself was no one to write home about.
That's absolutely true. And again, I mean, we can take either the short view or the long view, and the U.S. always takes the short view. So it takes this ideal situation that we have an undemocratic situation and an unstable personality in Gaddafi. So go in and murder him. Right. And then the country
is in chaos.
Murder him in the context of some abstract notion of liberating them for democracy. But of course, what we have is actually the opposite. Diametrically opposite of stability now in Libya. Libya is now not even a state.
Right.
That's right.
It is simply feudal warring factions taking place in contemporary time. The longer range view says find the progressives, work with them consistently over how they focus and how they want to organically build a long-term democracy, whether that's in Israel, of which the U.S. press tells us nothing about the progressive Jews, the peace movement, the revolutionary Jews, who see a long-range view of a true democratic state for all citizens of Israel. Rather, they take the short view of bomb, go to war, bomb, go to war, destruction. So we have to build in some patience in our politics. It all won't happen in our lifetime, but if we do our due diligence, it will accumulate over a long period of time.
I want to thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate this.
Very good.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of The Global African. I'm your host, Bill Fletcher, and we'll see you next time.